Hi, Nick. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Camera Shake, the podcast all about photography, videography, filmmaking, gear, and everything and anything that's got anything to do with that. We are currently stuck in a house, sitting out the coronavirus epidemic, as I'm sure you probably are. So this might be a good opportunity to do something a little bit different. So we've decided to come up with a podcast. We'll just introduce ourselves really quickly. My name is Kay. I'm a photographer, videographer, and so on and so forth. And
my name is Nick, and I primarily am a videographer.
Awesome. Well, let's get straight into it. So normally, under normal circumstances, Nick and me would be working together a lot, but of course, we're stuck at home. And so this is our way to communicate now. So Nick, what have you been up to over the last few weeks?
Other than being stuck indoors?
Other than being stuck indoors,
as well. I'm getting a little tired of it, if I'm honest with you. So I'm just trying to come up with creative ways of just keeping myself occupied. We had our little competition, which we'll get onto a little bit later, I hope, and show people what we've been doing there. And starting this podcast has been great. Doing a little bit of pre-work on that and doing this every week will be something to keep me a little bit sane. Other than that, I've actually been really, really busy. Just about finished up a school production film, which we filmed a couple of weeks back. But I tell you what, I was having some problems exporting this last night, and so I was up until about 2 a.m., which is why I didn't sleep very well. So I was up until about 2 a.m. fighting with why it wouldn't export without audio dropping in and out in Premiere Pro. And I worked out what it was in the end. I had a third-party plugin from Isotope on my master out, which was, for some unknown reason, just went a bit crazy. So I literally had to disable it and re-enable it, and it fixed the problem.
Isn't that like the most annoying thing when you do something that you've done like 1,000 times before, and when you really need it to work, it just, for some inexplicable reason, doesn't work, and it makes no sense whatsoever.
Exactly. And I promised I would get this revision out last night as well, and I was just fighting this. I had to send a quick message saying, I'm having a few problems with export. Bear with me. It will come out tonight. And finally it got there. Trouble is, it's about an hour and a half show, right? And so that takes quite a while to export. And I can't be sure by just exporting just a minute or two that the problem's solved. I need to export the whole lot.
So just for our listeners to understand who we are, I'm predominantly a stills photographer who dabbles in videography and filmmaking, and Nick is a videographer who also does photography. I think it's probably fair to say, isn't it?
Yeah, I dabble in photography like you dabble in videography. Yeah,
exactly. So we come from different ends of the spectrum, but actually we work a lot together on a lot of different projects. We've worked on a lot of video projects together, and we've also worked on a number of photo projects together, photo shoots together. So, which is exactly what we'd be doing right now if it wasn't for coronavirus, and that just means that we're stuck indoors. And just from a professional business perspective, of course, what that's meant for my photography business is that all of my contracts, all of my photo shoots have been cancelled really for the foreseeable future. And of course, as a small business owner, you always hope that, that really means they're postponed. But I'm pretty sure, a number of those will really not come to fruition in the end, which, has made it difficult in a number of ways. And how has this whole thing affected you as a filmmaker?
Man, it's been a nightmare. Well, I say that. Lots of projects cancelled or postponed and deferred to later in the year. However, I've been getting additional work because of the teaching that I do. So we've been stepping that up in the interim. So I've actually been getting more work that way, less work in other ways. So it's balancing out a little bit right now. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do about this lockdown. There's nothing we can do about this coronavirus knocking about at the moment. So we make the best of it. We keep ourselves occupied. We try to find other ways to keep ourselves creative. And, that's what we're trying to do here, right?
But I think, thanks to technology, we're able to do these things like podcasts. I mean, the whole idea of setting up a podcast has been an idea we've been bouncing, around for quite some time. And of course, now we find ourselves in a situation where, this is a really great creative outlet. And the plan really is to do that on a weekly basis. So we come up with a new episode every week. So if anything, it's really kind of forced us to do something and to actually take action and execute something that we've been thinking about for a long time. And of course, because, in your day-to-day day job with, and family life and everything else, it's difficult to just get something done. And it feels like you're kicking the can down the road, like constantly, And so I found that this being stuck in the house and having to deal with, isolation and all the rest of it, it just fuels the creative brain. And you end up, sometimes out of sheer boredom, you end up just executing things. So you can look at the positives, in this sort of dreadful situation. One of the things that we've decided to do is to come up with a photo challenge every week. So we set ourselves a topic and we then make a photograph or a video, in fact, and we then critique each other in a positive way about that. We'll basically talk about our efforts every week. So that's just one thing you can do, and you can do it from afar, which is again thanks to the blessings of modern technology. That's all doable. Interesting thing I saw on the BBC news website a few days ago. It was a really interesting article about this actually. And it basically went along the lines of like, what would the world be like if this coronavirus thing had happened in 2005? And that was really quite eye-opening because, in 2005, yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem that far away. No, it doesn't seem that long ago. But in 2005, the iPhone hadn't been invented yet. Really? Skype hadn't introduced, because that came out in 2007 or something.
Is that right?
Yeah, the first iPhone. Skype hadn't introduced video calling yet. So there's no video calling. So smartphones didn't exist. People had flip phones at the time, and the average...
I had a flip phone.
So did I.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a Motorola Razr. I think it was called.
Same. Yeah,
man.
Yeah.
Sweet phone. I tell you what, I had a hard time letting go of flip phones. I loved flip phones at the time because it was just the Star Trek communicator thing that I thought was awesome. So it took me a long time. I think I got on board with the iPhone. I think my first iPhone was the iPhone 4 or something like that. So it took quite a long time.
Yeah, I don't think I moved to Apple phones until the 6.
Yeah.
Maybe no, 4S.
All right.
4S, that's right, yeah.
Obviously, things like Zoom weren't around in 2005, and people had to make phone calls. In fact, the average broadband connection in the UK was such that even downloading a music track would take several minutes, and downloading a movie would take several hours. And that was like the average broadband connection speed at the time. So there was no Netflix.
Was that still dial-up at that point, or was broadband out?
It was. I think it was broadband, but it was just slow broadband by modern standards.
Not even a megabit. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I remember. I mean, I used to live in a like a small village, out in the countryside, and the broadband connection there was abysmal. It was, in fact, I tell you what, it was so bad. It was so bad that I remember if we wanted to download a movie from iTunes, we would have to decide in the morning, set the download so that the movie was downloaded by the evening so we could watch it. I mean, that's how bad it was. Right, so one of the things that we're going to do every week is that we pick some topics from the world of photography news or videography news, and we'll pick a number of topics that we found really interesting. We'll talk about those. So, Nick, do you want to start with your first topic?
Yeah, sure. So you may or may not know, Kay, that I upgraded and purchased a Aputure 300D Mark II a couple of weeks back. And so for those of you who don't know, this is an upgrade on the 300D that Aputure released a couple of years ago now, I believe, maybe a bit longer.
So hang on. So the 300D I'm familiar with, and what's the new model called?
Mark II.
Oh, Mark II.
Mark II, yeah. So the light that most people will probably be familiar with, particularly if you do vlogging or you do any kind of YouTube video, you may have purchased a 120D or a 120D Mark II. Same idea, just a bit less powerful. More than enough for any kind of vlogging situation. So the reason I actually went for the 300D Mark II is simply because it's more power. I believe the 300 comes from 300 watts. I could be wrong there, but I'm guessing that. But I'm pretty sure it does. With some of the video that I end up doing, I want to make sure I've got the headroom within the light to be able to do it, particularly if I want to work outside and in daylight as well. I want it to be powerful enough to give that extra light. And the 300D definitely does that. It's really pricey. I mean, it's really pricey. It's about £1,000, maybe more like 1,100. I'm guessing in the US it's probably $1,000. It'll be give or take. But man, is it worth it? In fact, I'm using it right now. So the light you're seeing, almost all of the light you're seeing right now, other than the blue hint behind me, is all coming from the 300D, and it is set to, and I'll tell you what it is, only 16% right now. And my ISO is at 80 on my camera. So wow, okay. That's how powerful this thing can actually go. I'll tell you, actually, I bought a couple of bits to go with it, which I will mention in a minute. But, I've only had it for a couple of weeks, so I can only give you, a general idea of how good it is. Other than the power, it's small for the kind of power it's producing. It's really lightweight, and it's almost silent.
And it's just that powerful. It's just a constant light, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a continuous light rather than a flash. It's 5500 Kelvin balanced, which is great. But you can't change that in any way. So there's no color temperature adjustment here. Most LED lights these days have some kind of adjustment with that, and you can get your warmer light or your cooler light from it. And this doesn't do it. So on one hand, that's great that it's going to be high quality 5500, sorry. But to have a little bit of flexibility, that would have been nice. Not the end of the world, but for £1,100, I'd like maybe a little bit extra. That aside,
the smaller model of that is the 160D, isn't it? Or the 160D Mark II. So in terms of price range, where does that sit?
If memory serves me right, the 120D Mark II anyway is probably in the £600 to £700 range, and the 300D is in the £1,000 to £1,100 range, give or take. So the other thing about it is, I was just going to say, it's silent. I mean, it is silent. A light that powerful shouldn't be that silent. It's incredible. It's got these two little fans underneath, which are just constantly going, and it keeps it cool enough. And I've not heard fans like that. Absolutely well impressed with that. Well impressed. Yeah,
we used it on a shoot the other day, and it's really impressive. Like there's no sound, but it's silent.
I can't believe it. It's got a bones mount on it, which is cool. So I decided at the same time to buy the Aputure Light Dome 2 and the Fresnel 2X as well. So the Light Dome is on right now, and hopefully it's coming across well enough in the picture. But can you see how soft that light is? And it's literally wrapping around my face in the nicest possible way. I mean, prior to that, I was using some LED panels and things like that, and using some additional diffusion, that kind of thing, which is great. For the money that costs, it's great. But this is just such a huge step up in the quality of light that it's producing, and the picture, it's just, I love it. I absolutely love it. So the Light Dome, I've got the grid on at the moment as well. So it's much more directional. The light downside with the light dome, it's massive. I mean, it is. We're talking like this kind of width right now. It's huge, but that's what enables that light to be so soft, right? So it's worth it. They do a mini version, so if you do have a bit of a tighter space that you're regularly using, it's probably well worth getting getting the smaller version too. And then just to move on to the Fresnel 2X, which I mentioned as well. As I understand it, putting that on the front of the 300D gives around 8 times as much power. It focuses the light, so it's significantly brighter. Obviously, the consequence of that is rather than having a spread of light, it does narrow it significantly, a bit more like a spotlight, right?
But if you're shooting outside and you're combating bright sunlight, then that's exactly what you need potentially. Yeah,
totally right.
I can kind of add to that because I just recently bought this thing.
It's very yellow.
It's very yellow. Yeah, it's the Interfit Honey Badger Unleashed. And it's also a light. It's a flashlight. So although it does have the ability to produce constant light, it's got an LED model light in it, which can be used for video. It's by far not as powerful as anything the Aputure 300D can produce. But if you're in a fix, that'll do it.
I guess if its primary function is a flash, right, and you've just got that ability to have continuous light as and when you need it, it doesn't need to be the 300D, right?
It's an absolute bonus, I have to say. I mean, obviously, being predominantly a still photographer, I bought this as a flashlight, and the reason why I decided to go for this is really predominantly because of the form factor. For those of you who know a little bit about flash photography, it will immediately sort of remind you of the Alien Bees. The form factor is very boxy. It's very small. It's different from a lot of other flashes or studio strobes who are very elongated and long. And for me, working a lot out of my home studio, it's a very tight space. It has a high ceiling, which is great, but I need to get this light really close back against the wall. And even those few inches that I'm missing in terms of length make a massive difference, especially when you think you have a modifier on the front. If you have slightly larger octobox or something like that on the front, then it adds to the size of the whole contraption, as it were. And so getting it just these few inches further closer to the wall it does make a big difference. It makes a big difference. The reason why it's called the Honey Badger Unleashed is because it's the most recent version from Interfit. And it's a wireless version, so it has a battery compartment.
Nice.
The original Honey Badger only worked with AC power, so you had to plug it into the wall. And this one is totally mobile, so I can take it out on location. In fact, we did a shoot with it the other day, which we may talk about maybe in the next episode in more detail. But this is great. It's a Bones S-type connector, so any standard modifier will fit right on it, no matter whether it's a soft box or an octobox or whatever it is. You can attach umbrellas. It's really very, very useful.
How long are you getting out of the battery?
So the spec says about 430 flashes on full power. That is pretty decent, I have to say.
That's pretty good.
That's considerably more than you would get out of a regular speedlight.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind that this is considerably more powerful than a regular speedlight, it's a really, really useful thing. The one disadvantage I should say is that you cannot actually plug it into the wall. So it would be great if you had the option to run it like a regular studio light when you're in the studio, and then just take it out and use the battery on location. Who knows? Maybe the next version they'll add that.
Honey Badger Unleashed Mark II. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
So can you get additional batteries for it?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
I guess there are a few occasions where you're going to want more than 500 flashes. If you've got a string of portraits going on, that like I know you do at corporate events and whatnot, you might want want that to be longer. But yeah, so it's a pity it doesn't go into AAC as well.
Yeah, that's a real. I mean, that's one of the disadvantages I have to say. As a headshot photographer, if I have headshot clients at home or in my home studio, then it's just one additional thing that I have to make sure that the battery is always fully charged, before a session and so on and so forth. So it would just be nice if I could just plug it in and forget about it and not worry about it. But the advantages that it gives me, just by the sheer fact that I can take it out on location, makes up for that completely. Because the other thing you're going to worry about when you're out on location is like, where do you get the power from?
Yeah.
So this, in that respect, is super easy. It's also really super easy to use. I mean, it really, for anybody who's got any experience with studio flashes, it works like any other studio flash. Interfit make a specific remote for it, which is super easy and totally intuitive in the way that it works. So anybody who's ever used a flash before will know how to use this instantaneously. And even if you haven't, it's not a massive learning curve, I have to say. Just operating this light is super easy. So there are some real advantages. It's relatively light, so it fits in your backpack or in your gear bag, and you can take it. It's not necessarily the cheapest light. It comes in at about 250 British pounds, or pounds sterling, which you can get, especially if you're just beginning to get into studio flash kind of photography. Then there are cheaper versions. But
how does that price compare to perhaps a Nikon or Canon speed light?
Well, I mean, you can get cheaper speed lights. There's some of those Chinese manufacturers that make considerably cheaper. So you can get cheap lights. Yongnuo, you can probably get something under £100. And for anybody starting to get into flash photography in general, speed lights are absolutely fine. I've shot for many years just with a speed light setup. I've done many professional portraits and professional shoots with a number of speed lights. That's not a problem. The problem comes when you're shooting outside and when you're shooting in bright sunlight. That's when you run into problems with speed lights, because they're just not powerful enough to overpower the sun. So, so that is really where the problem lies, and that's where a proper studio flash can come in handy. The other thing about the Honey Badger is that it's a high-speed sync flash, so it allows you to shoot at very high shutter speeds. It goes all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second. Wow. Which is phenomenal if you're doing sports photography, for example, or you're doing, you're shooting things that move very fast, like skateboarders, jumping off of a ramp or whatever it is, that sort of thing. You can freeze that at a high shutter speed, and you can still power the light in with this thing. So it's really, from a professional point of view, it's a really useful, small, portable light. And of course, there are more powerful options out there. But for 99% of what you would do, it's a perfect flash. Yeah. And it doesn't cost thousands of pounds or thousands of dollars. Yeah. It's not really going to break the bank so much. So, and of course, they work in combination with the speed light. So I would use the speed light, as a background light or something like that. Still, so it's not that I've stopped using speed lights. I still use them for a number of things. But my main go-to flash in the studio and on location is really the Honey Badger at the moment, and it's working out quite well. Because if you think about some of the more upmarket brands like Broncolor or Profoto, they set you back thousands and thousands of pounds. And as a real alternative, I think the Honey Badger is one of the best solutions out there right now.
It doesn't seem that expensive to me, really, considering what I've had to pay for the 300D, and they're probably, with regards to what they do, they're probably comparable, with their quality, continuous light versus flash.
One of the other things to take into consideration is consistency in the output power of a flash. And I have to say the Honey Badger has been extremely reliable in that. What happens very often with, so for low-end studio flash or speedlight is that you take a shot and it exposes in a certain way, and then you take the next shot and the power isn't 100% the same. And especially on speedlights, when the batteries are starting to run out, the difference can be quite remarkable. So you're going to get one shot that's perfectly exposed, and then the next shot is maybe underexposed by a little bit. And so you're constantly, in editing, you're constantly fixing these exposure issues. The other thing that it does is it has a stroboscopic mode, which means that it can do 90 flashes per second.
No.
Yeah, so 90,
Wow.
I think that's what it is, 90 flashes per second. So if you're doing like if you want to take multiple shots, again, of like a skateboard coming off of a ramp or something that's fast moving, you can just strobe the heck out of it and get these flash.
Is that at maximum power as well?
Yeah, that's what it seems to be doing. So I haven't tested that yet, by the way, but
does
on
that
paper,
mean then if the battery can do? Did you say somewhere in the region of 500 flashes at full power?
Yeah, 430. So if you're strobing it, I don't think the battery. Yeah, I don't think the battery's gonna hold up very long. You just see multiple battery packs.
You got to try it.
Like I said, I haven't actually tested it yet. That's just what it says on the tin. So, but other than that, it's not bad. The charge time, by the way, of the battery is 1.5 hours from empty to full, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get those number of flashes out of it, that's all right. I've got batteries that take 3 times longer than that to charge.
Yeah, I mean, under normal circumstances, if you think like in the middle of a shoot, if you get to change the battery and you're putting a fresh one in and then you're putting the old one on charge, I mean, really, it's going to take you longer than an hour and a half to run that battery down, I think, under normal circumstances, in a normal shoot situation. So actually, you should be totally fine with just 2 battery packs and just switch them over, So yeah, I mean, my experience with it has been really good. Also, I love the fact that it's yellow and it's got this honey badger thing on the side.
Is that painted on, or is that actually vents?
No, these are the vents. Yeah. So it's funny. Yeah, they clearly have a sense of humor, which I like. So,
yeah.
Totally sold on that.
Well, I look forward to hearing more about it as you get it into more once we're out of the situation we're in, and hearing how it stands up in other situations.
Yeah, and of course I'll be using it to create our photo challenges. So that's another thing. Okay, so what else have you got for us then today? Any other topics you want to talk about?
I saw a couple of posts the other day where this French, one of them was this French producer. Forgive me for my pronunciation. I think it's Benoit Millot. And he produced this 1-minute video of photographs that he'd taken in the centre of Paris a few days, sometime, I believe about a week ago now, where he's gone to all the main sites and taken a photo about noon, about midday. And all I can say is it's the eeriest thing I think I've ever seen. I've been to Paris a couple of times, and I know what it's like. I've been to these sites that are in these photos at the various times of the day, and it's just heaving with people constantly. Now, because they're all in lockdown, these photos, I believe 1 photo or 2 photos had a person in it somewhere, and that was it. And I've never seen anything like it. Very, very cool photos. And he produced this 1-minute video, just stitching them all together, and it looks great. He called it simply Paris 2020. And you can check it out on, I believe he posted it on Vimeo. The other one I saw, which is it's absolutely on the same lines, is there's a Hungarian photographer who does aerial photography mostly. And he logged in to loads of publicly accessible webcams in Italy, across the major cities. And in Italy are in probably a tougher lockdown than France, I guess, right now, in Paris, and certainly than we are in the UK. And he's basically print screened on his laptop photos from these webcams, and just done a series of 30, I think he did 40 photos all in all, across various different landmarks in Rome, Florence, places like that. And again, it just shows what's going on in these countries right now. There's people aren't there, and you won't get these photos any other time probably in our generation, right?
You know what that reminded me of, actually? Is this the very first photograph ever to be taken in the history of photography. The very first photograph ever to be taken of a human being was taken in 1838 by somebody called Louis Daguerre, and it was just a photo of a street in Paris, I believe. And because of the exposure time necessary for it, of course, it basically meant that all humans in the image would sort of disappear because they'd be moving through the image. But the exposure time was such that it would simply just expose all the things that were stationary and didn't move. So you could see the road and you could see the lampposts and the trees and everything else, but you couldn't see any humans in it. All right, except there was a guy who had his shoes shined, and because he was in the same position for a longer period of time, he appears in the photograph, and that is officially the first photograph of any human being ever taken.
That's cool.
And it's we'll post it on the on our Facebook page maybe. But it's a really interesting photograph because it's just, you can see like an outline, like almost like a shadow of a person there, but you can definitely make out it's a person. But other than that, it seems, or it appears to be a completely empty street, which of course in reality it wasn't. But it's very interesting. Yeah, and that was 1838.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Any idea what the exposure time was?
That's a very interesting question. But it would have had to have been several minutes, I would have thought.
Wow. Yeah.
So he developed a photographic technique called daguerreotype, which basically meant that the image was exposed on a plate that was coated with chemicals. And it just took a relatively long time for those chemicals to react. And so therefore, the exposure time had to be that long. So you had to basically expose that plate and those chemicals with light for a set amount of time. And that essentially meant that anything that was fast moving in the frame would just simply disappear. We still do that, of course, nowadays with long exposure times, but back in those days, it was the only way to expose something onto this plate. So that's how that came about. It's just an interesting sort of thought to think like that was the first person ever to be photographed. And secondly, who was that guy? Like, we will never know. We will never know who that was. Who was that dude? And that dude never in his life knew that he was the first person to appear in a photograph. And, if you think like how we take selfies today and how we use our phones to take photographs, and it's so natural and normal, and we don't even think about it. But that photograph has such a special meaning in the history of photography. Not the first photograph ever to be taken, but the first photograph of a human being to be taken ever. That's just, that in my head, it's crazy when I look at that. What's interesting is because my dad actually used to turn our bathroom into a dark room. So he used to block out the windows and shut the door. And as a kid, I wasn't allowed in when he was developing a black and white phone at the time. So, but I just, I remember like the smell of the chemicals and all that, stuff that went into it. It's funny this because when I was a kid, I started by using video cameras. So I got into photography via video, which usually that's probably the other way around. But when I was a kid, I was making videos. I had my own video camera, which at the time was like a big deal. And so I always thought I'd be a filmmaker one day.
Did that video camera have the old VHS tapes in?
No, it was Video 8. So I was already I used the old, I used full format VHS at school where we had like a video club. And the camera there was like, you had it on your shoulder and it's like, nice. One of those big beasts. But my video camera was a Video 8mm tape
Nice.
Video camera, which it's a slightly smaller form factor. It also had high speed, like I think 1,000 frames per second was a high speed function on it.
Really?
No, it looked terrible, by the way. By modern standards. But just think, the way I used to edit videos at the time, because I used to make lots of like little short films and everything, but the way I used to edit them, it was so basic. I literally, because this was like pre-computers and everything. So I had I had a VHS recorder like a VCR, and my camera. And I used to press play on my camera. I used to press record on the VHS, and then I used to pause it and like fast forward and edit it that way. So it was super crude.
Keep pausing on the video recorder.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay.
So yeah, and it'd be like multiple attempts, and it's, until you had it, so it was cut in the way that you wanted to cut it. And then a friend of mine had her dad was into making videos, and he had a title generator, which was a thing that you could put in the middle between two VCRs, or the camera and the VCR, and you could pre-program little titles so you could put over the top, so you could have some.
Wow.
It's super, super basic, but of course, that allowed you to make all sorts of different movies. And I made all sorts of movies. I built models and shot like little space movies and stuff like that. Practical effects. That's one of the things I loved about it was doing practical effects. I did a whole lot of practical effects at the time, which was, and some of my movies were literally just based around these effects. I just worked out how to do something, and I'll just shot a little. Nice. I'll shoot a little sequence about that. Cool. Well, I tell you what, I've got a little thing to talk about, which I've come across a day or so ago, which made me laugh. So there's a place. So get this, right? There's a place in England called Buxton, and it's in the Peak District. So it's somewhere near like Macclesfield, or between Manchester and Sheffield, or whatever it is. I haven't ventured that far
that way.
North. Yeah, it's that way. But. So there's a place called Buxton, and near Buxton is a place called the Blue Lagoon, which is an artificial lake, if you want.
Okay.
But it's known for its lagoon-like blue water, and so it's one of the prime destinations for lots of Instagrammers taking selfies of themselves in front of this blue lagoon. And despite the recent restrictions of travel and movement in the UK, apparently there were still lots of Instagrammers who ventured out there to take selfies of themselves, and the police had to get involved to disperse the crowds, as it were, and to tell these people to go home and stay indoors. And so what they decided to do, and this is what cracks me up, they decided to throw black dye into the Blue Lagoon to make the water less attractive for people to take their pictures.
It's genius.
It's a genius way of dealing with it. Although,
can you imagine how much dye that would take?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some pictures of it. Like they obviously, they must have thrown a whole lot of dye in there. It's like
go and throw my jeans in there.
Yeah. So the idea was basically to dye it black so that it's less attractive. I'm immediately thinking, but surely now that you've done that and that you've published that story, surely now even more people might be going out there just to see the Black Lagoon. Yeah, exactly. So. Time will tell whether that worked in the way intended, but...
Oh, that's incredible. It must look. I bet it looks like an oil slick.
Yeah, it does exactly look like an oil slick. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So nice. I'm pretty sure it wasn't oil that they threw in there. They said it was black dye, but...
I tell you what, even though we're locked down, we're still allowed out to do emergency things and whatnot. As long as we take separate cars, maybe we should take a little trip and take a photo.
Exactly.
No, I'm not encouraging that. No.
Exactly. Yeah, stay indoors. Wash your hands.
Yeah, wash your hands. Don't touch your face. Oh, that's cool, man. I can't wait to see a photo of that. That's going to be incredible.
Well, of course, we're gonna put links and photos on our Facebook page.
So I had one other thing I just wanted to mention, real quick one, because I saw it the other day and I think it's fantastic what they're doing. So Apple are allowing 90-day trials of Final Cut Pro X.
Oh, really?
And 90-day trials of Logic Pro X
for
as
free.
Well. For free. I think they're normally 14 or 30-day trials that they'll let you have, and then they'll just stop working, as you can imagine. But they're doing 90 days because of what's going on with the obviously with the coronavirus and whatnot, and get people creating audio, creating video content and whatnot at home. I thought that's fantastic. I mean, Final Cut's normally about I think £250 or £300, and Logic is around the £200 mark. So to get those fully functional for 90 days is incredible.
Yeah, I have to say, I love what some of the companies are doing right now. To get people to try stuff out and keep people occupied and give them give them opportunities to be creative at home.
Yeah. That's amazing. I told a friend of mine about this the other day, and he's gone and downloaded Final Cut, and he's starting because he was using iMovie previously. He just likes to dabble and like make little like phone videos and things like that. And so he downloaded Final Cut, and we had a Zoom call the other week with another friend of ours, and I'd just given him some sort of tips and sort of get started kind of know-how on it, and it was great fun. I even learned some stuff. Cool. I used to use Final Cut years ago, and I moved to Premiere Pro. But Final Cut is great at what it does, and for the price, it's a one-off cost. Whereas Adobe, you have to pay your monthly subscription, which may or may not be what you want. But to be able to just try them out for 90 days for free is amazing.
That's great. Yeah, and of course, it gives you the opportunity to create stuff, and then also to make up your mind as to what which system you might want to favor. Exactly. It's like for us, it's a funny thing. We work together on a number of video projects, and of course, I edit in Final Cut Pro, and you edit in Adobe Premiere Pro. So our systems are not necessarily compatible, but we're still making it work. So
yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, Logic, I don't know how familiar you are with Logic or sort of audio workstations, but I actually have a bit more of a background in doing audio engineering anyway. And so, Logic's great. I mean, it's what students are learning on in schools, primarily Logic and Pro Tools. Pro Tools moved to subscription-based kind of model a couple of years ago now, I believe. I'm not sure how much that is, or whether they've extended their free trials or not, but check it out, let us know. If they are, I'll grab that. So I used to use Pro Tools as well, but I use PreSonus Studio One. You can get a free version of that as well, and they do trials, just other ones to try out. But Logic, 90 days, do it. Just do it. Even if you only use it once, try it.
Cool. Again, we'll put all the links in the description and on our Facebook page. You'll find out too.
Wicked, man.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, I've got one more thing to talk about, which made me laugh even more than the Blue Lagoon thing.
That's impossible.
Especially because I never really heard of a place called Buxton before. But
do you know what Buxton reminds me of?
What's that?
Have you seen Shawshank Redemption? Of course, you've seen Shawshank.
I have. Yeah.
Buxton is where Red has to go to, and he finds that box underneath the black rock,
right?
To go and find out. I've forgotten the main character's name now. Andy.
Yeah.
To find out where Andy's gone. That's Buxton under that oak tree.
Right. See, that's another
irrelevant information.
That's another movie to put back on my Netflix. Have to view list.
Exactly.
So, as now that I'm halfway through Disney Plus's selection of Marvel movies, which we're watching in chronological order. That's right, in chronological order. Oh, yes.
Really?
Yes, starting with the first Avenger, Captain America, moving on to Iron Man, the whole 9 yards, all the way to Endgame, for sure. Right, so I've got one more thing to talk about, and that's something that I came across the other day that made me laugh a lot. And that is it's a story about a Lithuanian-based wedding photographer called Adas Vasiliauskas. I have no idea whether I pronounced that right or not. But basically, his wedding photography business has all but collapsed. So he's found himself with canceled weddings and canceled shoots and canceled contracts and no income at all. And so he's decided to make use of this off time, if you want, and put that to use in a creative way. And so what he's done is he's taken his drone and he's taken photos of people through their living room windows. And that sounds weird. I know that sounds weird, but he's done it with consent. And what's happened is that he's created these really hilarious photos where people are dressing up and they're posing inside of their flats and houses or on their balconies or on their porches in fancy dress and doing funny things. And the photos are hilarious. They're all taken with his drone. And that made me think, I fly a drone myself, mainly for fun. Yeah. And also, to make photos and so on and so forth. And of course, The drone laws in the UK are such that you could never do this because you've got to stay at least 150 meters away from build-up areas or a minimum of 50 meters from any form of building. So that's the law. So even under those circumstances, you could never do that. You could never create these kind of photos over here in the UK, and I'm sure in like many other countries too. So this seems to be different in Lithuania, but the end results were hilarious. And again, we'll link to that on our Facebook page.
So were these like random people, or does he know? Are they friends? Does he know them?
No, he must know these people because when you look at the photos, you realize that it was totally pre-arranged. So obviously because they're wearing fancy dress and they're posing at the windows, doing funny things. So they were all staged in that way. But just the sheer fact that they were taken with a drone outside somebody's window, and some of these people lived in like tower blocks. I think several stories up. Or there were a bunch of people on their veranda, on their porch, sunbathing in full on like military gear with gas masks, and stuff like that. So a lot of these photos are absolutely hilarious and really, really good fun. And it just goes to show that you can be creative even under those circumstances.
Yeah. Wow. When you started telling me about that, I didn't know where this was going to go. I really didn't.
Yeah, it sounds weird when you first like, you obviously you would never want to take photographs of people through their windows with a drone under any circumstances, right? That's definitely not cool. But of course, these were pre-arranged shoots with full permission of the people being photographed, and it was an artistic project.
Yeah. So
if you head over to our Facebook page and have a look at the link there, you'll see what I'm talking about. Right, so now it's time for our weekly photo challenge. Every week, Nick and me set ourselves a challenge to create a photograph or a video, in fact. But we started with a photograph. So this week's challenge was music teachers at home, I think we could say. And so what we'll do is we'll bring our photos up and we'll talk about them. We'll talk about how we made them, what the thinking was behind them. And we hope you enjoy that. So here we'll start with our photo number 1. Should we start with your photo, Nick?
It was our first week of doing some kind of teaching using Zoom, right? So my kind of idea here was more the stress and the strain of getting it to the settings right and perfect, making sure the students are able to hear us, we can hear them, things like that. So you can see that I've composited 3 separate photos here of me. I've got a ukulele behind me there in front of my laptop. In the middle, I've got my bass, because I'm a bass player, looking quite angry and upset, and my head in my hands over my piano as well. And so what I ended up doing, I actually used rather than using Flash for the 3 photos, I actually used the 300D as a continuous light instead, which obviously adds a bit of a different look to it. But I wanted to really put it through its paces and see what it could do. And so all this photo was in the preparation more than anything else. The photos themselves didn't take long at all, but it's getting it framed up in such a way that I knew I could fit in 3 separate photos of me, so clones of myself, if you like. And so I started with the photo at the back where I'm on my laptop. And it was, man, I was moving my camera and zooming in and out and moving it by millimeters to make sure that laptop screen was just in frame and that I was going to leave enough room for the middle shot to be there. And so I started with that shot. I lit just that shot. And then obviously I didn't move the camera at all. Then I did the shot by the piano. I moved my light to light that shot and took some photos there. And if you look carefully, you can see that actually I'm not sat in the middle of the piano. I've actually moved everything to the left of the piano, more towards the bass end, because that's how it fitted. It framed better that way in the end. So I lit that, took a few photos there, and then I took the shot in the middle as well, and moved the light and lit that shot as well. I only changed the focus point for each of the shots, and then brought those into Photoshop and masked out the bits that I didn't want. I was actually, you'll probably see as well that the that light with the green lampshade, that should be about bang on in the middle of the frame, give or take. So that my original idea was that might be a masking point for me, but it didn't work out that way because of the way the light, I'd positioned the light for the photos and the way the light was coming off that lamp as well. There wasn't a good masking point there at all. It wouldn't work. It would just cut some of the shadows and it just looked unnatural. It didn't look right. So actually, I've ended up using the mirror as one of the masking points, coming down and then going behind what is my middle photo where I'm in the center of my bass guitar and just cutting down below that way, which worked a lot better. So I tell you what I struggled with this composite was around my hair and masking out around there. I had a really hard time with that. So my hair at the top almost looks too perfect because I wanted to do it quickly and I didn't want to learn too much as I was going, like Googling how to do this. I wanted to use my skills at the moment to be able to composite this. And so I didn't know how to mask out the hair with keeping like stray hairs and things like that all natural. So I'd really welcome your thought. I know how good you are in Photoshop. I'd welcome your thoughts on how to go about that better in the future. Anyway, I guess a lot of me waffling on about that photo.
But there's a number of different ways that you could do it. Hair is one of the hardest things to mask out and to get a realistic looking effect, basically. Yeah. But it's totally doable. And in fact, some of the tools in the later versions of Photoshop are really doing a great job at doing that. So, and it always depends on to what degree of perfection you want to achieve.
Yeah.
So just to give you an example, sometimes when I'm doing a LinkedIn headshot for somebody, and I need to mask out that person because I need to put that person in front of a different background or something, these photos are going to end up being really tiny, small. So the degree of perfection in those photographs is very different from something that's going to end up on a billboard, for example. So it really depends on the use of the photograph and how big it's going to end up being, either in print or on screen. Mm-hmm. And so I think what you've done there actually looks really good. Especially when I look at it on my phone, it's great. I can't really. That's absolutely good enough for what we were trying to achieve there. So it looks, the light looks very realistic. So just by looking at it, it looks like all three yous are in the same room. And that's another thing to take into consideration when you're cloning yourself, is especially when you start moving the light around, is how realistic that light would actually look. Because if you light the same subject in several different ways and they all appear in the same scene, it very quickly starts to look very unrealistic.
Yeah. So I actually changed the intensity of light depending on where I'd moved it to try and keep it as balanced as possible. I actually got it wrong on the middle photo. It was too much. So I actually edited that photo separately to bring the highlights down and some of the whites a little bit to try and make it match before I then composited it and then kind of edited the whole photos and colored it in that way. Yeah,
that's a really good way of going about it. It's once you've got all your composites together, it's a really good idea to then take the whole photograph,
correct some of them first,
and then basically edit the whole thing and and make that to tie it all in and make it all look as if everything's actually in the same frame. So when you put a composite together, it's really important to think about making your lighting as consistent as possible, because when different objects are lit in different ways and you put them together into the same frame, it very quickly becomes very obvious that they didn't actually exist in the same frame originally. Mm-hmm. And that's when you can tell that something is composited together. So when you set up a shoot like that, you want to make sure that you set your lights so that they're consistent all the way through. So what I mean sometimes is that you set your lights up and they just stay in the same place and they're set to the exact same power. And then when you put objects into that scene, they're lit in a way that looks very realistic, because that's how the light would fall on them had they been there at the same time, if that makes sense.
Should we take a look at yours?
Sure.
First question is that all one photo, or is it a composite?
Yeah, so that's all one photo.
Nice.
Yeah, so basically, the idea behind my photo was, since the topic was, the modern day music teacher teaching remotely, via a camera and a screen. It's the thinking was that really all you can see is like the upper part of the body, and you have no idea what's going on below the waistline. And really anything could be going on, you just have no idea. So in this case, my idea was that, I'm having a foot bath whilst I'm teaching the guitar. And of course, there's all sorts of mess going on that the student will never see, because all they see is my head, or the top half of my body, and the background, and I really have no idea what else is going on. So you have a completely false impression as to what reality is. So the reality for the person watching is completely different from, people don't know what's going on here. I might be naked from the waist down. I'm not, but you never know.
I've just noticed Darth Vader.
Yeah. So yeah, so a recurring theme in the portraiture that I do is that you'll find hidden Star Wars elements if you look hard enough. Way exactly.
So what lens did you use? Because was it quite a wide angle lens?
Yeah, so this one was a 14 to 24.
You can feel the distortion at the edges in a really nice way.
Yeah,
in a really nice way. Yeah.
So the lens that I used for this one was a 14 to 24, and it's probably around about, I would say probably around about 20 mil. So it wasn't all the way out. The problem that I have in this space is that I can't go back very far. So I need to use a wide lens to capture the whole scene, or as much of the scene as I wanted to capture. And what that brings with it is a lot of barrel distortion. So it's, a fisheye would be an extreme example of that. Sure. It's not quite as bad as a fisheye lens, but it goes into that direction. So to make sure that the lines are straight, there's a number of things you got to do. You got to get the angle right. So you got to set the camera up at the right angle. You can see a bit of the wall on the left-hand side of the photo, just behind the palm tree, and that's a straight line, or it's supposed to be a straight line in real life. And of course, depending on the perspective in a photograph, it just wouldn't appear like a straight line. So setting up your angles is very important in this. And also a little bit of post-production that happened there in order to straighten out those lines, those vertical lines. That's very important. But other than that, really, it's just it's a situational portrait, meaning it's a portrait of a person in a particular situation. And in this case, it's really all about creating a set, essentially, and making the set look good, because it's such an integral part of the photograph that whatever the person in it does really only makes sense in context. And by creating that set in the background and the stuff in the foreground, all the stuff on the floor and the guitars and the music and the Star Wars elements, all of that really just adds to creating a scene.
And something I think a lot of people would have maybe perhaps not done is you've deliberately, I guess, angled your laptop screen towards the camera.
Yeah.
All right. And that's just seems like such a small detail, but for me, looking at that, if that laptop was side on and you can only see the edge of the screen and you couldn't see the front of it at all, this photo wouldn't be nearly as good.
Yeah, I think the thing there is, you can remember that the model, if you want to me, or the person in it, interacts with something, and you got to get an idea as to what that person is interacting with. And again, just like I said, if you just had a side-on view of the laptop, you wouldn't be able to see what's on the screen. So this way, you can at least see what's in the screen. The thing that I would do differently now, if I do it again, would be that I would probably move the coffee can a little bit, because for me, it's blocking a little bit too much of the screen. So I wanted to have the coffee in there because it's also very integral to me. It's just one of these things. I drink a lot of coffee, as you know. I'm fueled by the stuff. So that to me is just part of my personality. But if I had to do it again, I would probably place the coffee cup maybe in a different place. so that there'd be a slightly clearer view of the screen. But I think, overall, it came out all right. I lit it with the honey badger, by the way.
There we go.
And a sort of a medium-sized softbox. And it was, I used the grid on it, but I had to peel the grid off on the side a little bit in order to get a little bit more light onto the palm tree on the side. So that plant was getting a little too dark when I originally lit it. So I had to peel that back a little bit on the side, just let a little bit of light coming out the side to fall into the light onto that palm tree, and it worked. I thought it worked really well. There's still a bit of a vignette going on, which is great. I like it. It's a natural vignette, so I didn't add any in post there.
Yep.
But it just helped that palm tree to come out a little bit.
Yeah.
I think with
absolutely.
And then of course you've got a lot of shiny surfaces in this, and this is the other thing that took quite a long time to take care of is reflections. Like if you look at the picture frame on my desk in the back there with the nutcracker on it. So it looks like it's leaning against the wall, but it's not really. It's angled at an angle because originally I got a lot of reflection from the softbox in there. And so I had to angle it away.
So rather than it being flat on the wall, it's
actually angled
that
forward.
way, isn't it?
Yeah. And the same with the Les Paul guitar on the left-hand side. That is angled. If you looked at that scene as it was on the set, it would have looked awkward. That it wouldn't. You would immediately think, well, you would never lean a guitar like that. But of course, in the photo, a photo being a two-dimensional representation of three-dimensional space, if you want, it doesn't. You can't really see that. But the difference that I've made was that I now didn't have any reflection on the top of the guitar. So it took a long time just, taking care of all of these little things and just moving things a little bit, taking test shots, moving it again, blah, blah, blah.
So I've just noticed that you've got 7 bottles of hot sauce up on top of that shelf that you've got in the background there. I've been looking at this photo now for 5 minutes straight.
Yeah.
And I've only just noticed that there's so much going on. That's incredible. Who thinks to put hot sauce in their photo of teaching? It's incredible.
Well, I think, with something like that, especially, it's effectively a self-portrait, if you think about it. I always think, I want to put as much of my own personality into the photo as I can. And even just as little details in the background that nobody, most people would probably completely ignore that fact or, not see it. Again, there are always things that when you look at the photo for a number of days, you kind of think like, okay, I should have done this, or next time I'll do this different. Again, for me, the coffee mug is one thing. The other thing is in the top right-hand corner, there's a lot of empty space in there. If I were to do this again, I would probably hang a picture there or something, or put something of interest coming in, maybe a lampshade or another plant coming in or something, just to frame that a little bit.
And that's the thing, right? On that particular day, that's exactly what you wanted. You went for it. And there's always going to be something in hindsight that you want to do ever so slightly differently. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it was wrong not to do it either. It's just think, I could make that slightly more interesting over here, and that's great. And that's why you keep doing this, right?
Yeah, and you got to remember that every photo that you make or every video that you edit is a learning opportunity. And that's true for somebody who's just beginning or who's just starting to get into photography. It's just the same for somebody who's been doing it for years, like myself. You learn stuff every time, and you use that knowledge on the next shoot. And so you get better at what you do just by critically thinking and reviewing your own work. What I like about this photo challenge in general is the fact that we set a topic, and then you could think it's the creative process to start with. Is where you think like, okay, what am I going to do? And then you start with a basic idea, and then you like I said, you flesh it out, and then you come up with the end result. It's the process that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And it's doubly challenging given that we're doing it from the confines of our home as well, right?
Exactly.
Because you've only got the space that you've got to work in. I had to rearrange and move stuff all around my living room to be able to get that shot because I had no other space big enough really to do what I had in mind to actually do. And so, yeah, I can't wait to do the next one. I really can't wait.
Yeah. So you know what they say, done is better than perfect. And that's definitely true in these things. So you just have to kind of get out there and start doing stuff. And then, critically review it. One thing that happens all the time, by the way, it's the same, for me, it's the same, no matter whether, I'll write a bit of music or make a photo or a video or something. You get into it and you kind of think, yeah, man, this is awesome, wicked, da, da, da. And then, of course, it's like, you think, well, this is the best thing I've ever done. When you then look back at it months later, you kind of look and you go like, well, it's not as good as I thought it was at the time. But that's because, of course, you're now 6 months or 3 months or whatever down the line, and you've learned more, and you now critically look back at something and you kind of go, well, actually now, I'll be able to do better. And that's kind of how you progress and you get better at that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So on that note, done is better than perfect. We've come to the end of our first episode of the Camera Shake podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope you tune in next week for the next episode. Just a bit of a warning, we may have some guests on the show. We'll see what's happening. But in any event, we'll see you next week.